Most men do not live. They brace. They flinch their way through existence, disguising their paralysis as discipline, their fear as strategy. They call it planning, stability, realism. But what they never name, what they bury under layers of logic and false control, is the one thing that governs them more than reason, desire, or belief: fear. Not the obvious kind. Not fear of pain or failure or death. No, the fear that rules every man is much quieter. It's the fear of freedom. Real, unadulterated freedom. The kind that strips away all excuses, all scripts, all borrowed identities, and leaves you face to face with the unbearable responsibility of becoming yourself. Robert Greene, in his cold, surgical dissection of power in human behavior, never outright maimed this fear, but he built a career around exposing its symptoms. Every law, every seduction, every strategy is an answer to the same unspoken question: how do I move through a world that punishes those who dare to act without permission? Most men never answer it directly. They cope. They posture. They become efficient machines of adaptation, rehearsing their roles with impressive precision: husband, provider, soldier, stoic. But deep underneath the competence and the camouflage lives a tremble, a tension, a quiet terror that if they were to stop performing, if they were to drop the mask, they would have nothing left. This is why men obsess over control, not to dominate others, but to avoid being exposed. They build systems, routines, empires of productivity, not because they are strong, but because they are afraid of what their unstructured self might reveal. They fear chaos, not because it is destructive, but because it is revealing. A man in chaos has nothing to lean on, no role to perform, no crowd to applaud. He is left with himself, and that, for most, is unbearable. So we shrink. We trade freedom for function. We kill spontaneity and call it responsibility. We castrate our instincts and call it maturity. But what we are really doing is building a cage inside our own skulls, one law at a time. And the door is always open. But walking out would mean confronting the thing we fear most: that all this time, the prison was voluntary, that we were never really trapped by the world, only by our refusal to disappoint it. Robert Greene doesn't offer comfort. His writing isn't made to console. It's made to disturb, to destabilize, because truth in his world is not gentle. It's a blade. And the first thing it cuts through is illusion. The illusion that being good is enough, that being useful will protect you, that being chosen means you are safe. None of that is true. Power, he shows us, belongs to those who are willing to be misunderstood, to those who risk being alone, unloved, even hated, because they refuse to kneel to fear. But most men never reach that point, not because they lack intelligence or drive, but because they've internalized their fear so deeply that they mistake it for identity. They call it their nature. They say, I'm just not that kind of person. But who told them that? Who convinced them that risk was recklessness, that self-interest was selfishness, that desire was danger? You start to see the pattern. Most moral systems are built not to elevate man, but to tame him, to keep him predictable, useful, contained. And once you believe your leash is a virtue, you'll stop questioning who put it there. This is the essence of Greene's darker truths. Most people are not free, and worse, they do not want to be. They fear the cost. They fear the consequences. They fear the unknown terrain that comes with authorship over their own fate. Because when you stop outsourcing your decisions to tradition, to religion, to social validation, you are left naked before your own life. There is no one left to blame. And that kind of exposure, that raw, terrifying autonomy, is what most men spend their lives avoiding.
But here's the paradox. The more you avoid that freedom, the more powerless you become. You start making decisions not based on what you want, but on what you fear losing. And a man who moves like that, reactively, timidly, strategically, but soullessly, becomes manipulatable, not just by others, but by the world itself. He becomes prey to every trend, every algorithm, every soft demand wrapped in the language of emotional responsibility. He doesn't live, he orbits, he performs, he survives. And if that sounds harsh, good. It's meant to. Because the only way to kill the fear that rules you is to drag it into the light and stare it down. Not philosophically, not theoretically, but with action. Real action. The kind that makes her voice shake. The kind that costs you applause. The kind that introduces silence into rooms that used to cheer for you. Because that's what power feels like at first. Alienation. And if you can endure that, if you can survive the storm of rejection and doubt and the unbearable quiet that follows your refusal to play small, you will finally see it. That the fear was never real, only rehearsed, inherited, imposed. But once you name it, once you violate it, it begins to die. Not all at once, but in layers. And beneath those layers is a man you have never met. One who isn't calculating his every move to avoid punishment. One who doesn't need to be liked to feel worthy. One who doesn't ask the world for permission to be dangerous. That man is not soft. He is not loud either. He is composed, quietly untouchable, because he no longer fears the worst-case scenario. He already walked through it. And now he knows there's nothing out there scarier than the lie he used to call his life.
Most men wait their entire lives for a green light that never comes. They wait to be told it's time, to speak, to act, to leave, to become. But the world doesn't give permission slips to the ones who threaten its balance. And make no mistake, a free man, a truly free man, is a threat. Not because he intends to harm, but because he cannot be controlled. He doesn't speak to please. He doesn't obey out of fear. He doesn't chase applause or retreat from silence. And in a culture that runs on consensus and comfort, that kind of man is radioactive. Robert Greene never framed it in soft language. He didn't say, find your passion or believe in yourself. He said, master the game or be mastered. He knew what most don't dare admit. There is a war under the surface of every polite conversation, every job interview, every romantic dynamic. And the men who lose are not the ones who fail, but the ones who never learned the rules. Or worse, the ones who knew them but refused to play out of moral hesitation, afraid of being perceived as dangerous. And here lies the secret. Fear doesn't disappear through avoidance. It metastasizes. What you don't confront becomes your cage. What you won't name becomes your identity. And so the fear persists not in your words, but in your silences, in the way you say, it's fine when it's not, in the way you tolerate disrespect for the sake of peace, in the way you sit in rooms that drain you, nodding along because being excluded feels worse than being erased. That's the slow erosion, not with explosions, but with daily betrayals of your own knowing, until one day you don't recognize yourself, not because you've changed, but because you never began. But there's a moment, a breaking point, where some men snap, not into violence, but into clarity. They stop asking for the world to see them. They start seeing themselves. And that's when the fear begins to die, not because it's gone, but because it's been repositioned. It becomes data, not a dictator. The man who walks through fear doesn't become fearless. He becomes fluent in it. He recognizes its language, its habits, its tricks, and he moves anyway. That is power. Greene's writing drips with this, the cold, clean separation between those who act and those who hope, those who strategize and those who wish. He doesn't glamorize ruthlessness. He reveals that passivity is far crueler in the long run. A man who never claims his space forces others to carry his unlived life. His resentment spills over into his relationships, his work, his words.
He becomes bitter not because the world was unfair, but because he never demanded more than survival from himself. The tragedy is not that men suffer, it's that they suffer silently, nobly, under the illusion that suffering itself is virtue, that sacrifice, no matter the target, is a badge of honor. But Greene reminds us sacrifice without sovereignty is slavery. If you're bleeding for something you don't believe in, something you didn't choose, you're not brave, you're disobedient. And here lies the secret. Fear doesn't disappear through avoidance, it in duty, in being a good man, in playing the hero in someone else's story. And society will applaud you for it. It will call you responsible, loyal, selfless. It will reward your performance with just enough praise to keep you numb. Until one day, when the house is quiet and the mask is off, you'll feel it, that gaping hollowness, not because you failed, but because you never dared. You'll look back not with shame, but with ache, for all the things you didn't say, the moves you never made, the life you didn't claim. And so the only way to kill the fear is not to wait until it fades. It's to move while it screams, to act while your knees shake, to speak the truth even when your voice cracks. That is how the muscle is built, not through theory, but through friction. Through choosing discomfort over delay, through choosing rejection over silence, through choosing solitude over a room that requires your compliance. And the first few times it will burn. People will mislabel you cold, distant, selfish. Let them, because Greene knew when you stop asking for permission, you start becoming unforgettable. Not because you're loud, but because you've become the one thing the world cannot commodify, a man who belongs to himself. And belonging to yourself truly means becoming dangerous, not in violence, not in volume, but in clarity. When a man no longer plays the role assigned to him, when he stops hiding behind credentials, charm, or compliance, he becomes something rare, something real. And real is terrifying to those who have only known performance. So they will test you, push you, doubt you, not because they see your weakness, but because they sense your strength, and they hope to smother it before it shames their cowardice. But this is where most fall. They flinch, they apologize for their intensity, they round their edges, they dim, but not you. You are learning, slowly, painfully, beautifully. You are learning that fear is not the enemy, avoidance is. And if you can hold your line, if you can stay still while others tremble, if you can keep your hands on the wheel while storms howl for your attention, then you are not just killing fear, you are becoming someone it cannot inhabit.
Eventually, the man who has looked fear in the eyes long enough becomes something else entirely. Not fearless, but ungovernable. That's the shift most never make. They spend decades trying to feel ready, waiting for the storm to pass. But readiness is a myth sold to the obedient. Robert Greene understood that mastery isn't about eliminating fear. It's about moving with it, ahead of it, through it, while the rest are still trying to make it vanish with positive affirmations and hollow confidence. The man who kills fear doesn't do it in a grand moment. He does it in 1,000 silent choices, speaking when it costs him, walking away when it isolates him, telling the truth when it threatens to burn the bridge behind him. Every time he acts in alignment, fear bleeds out a little more. But this path is not without cost. You will be misunderstood. They will say you've changed. They'll accuse you of hardness, of arrogance, of being unreachable. Let them. Because what they're really saying is this: you're no longer someone they can manipulate. The moment you stop shaping yourself to the mood of the room will grow cold. Good. Let it. Because your warmth should be earned, not extracted. Most men live on the leash of emotional approval, trained to respond to discomfort like dogs trained with treats. But the man who is no longer afraid of being disliked, excluded, misunderstood, he becomes immune.
And immunity is the beginning of authority. That's what Greene hinted at again and again in his works. Authority, true inner power, is not given, it's taken. And the man who takes it does so not by shouting, not by dominating, but by mastering himself to the point where no threat can unmake him. The real king isn't the one with the crown. It's the one who can sit in silence, in solitude, in rejection, and remain intact. Because most men are not men at all. They're mirrors, reflecting whatever energy gives them belonging. But a man who has killed fear doesn't reflect. He radiates. And what he radiates is uncorrupted clarity. This clarity makes you repulsive to the shallow. It makes you too intense for the polite. You stop being invited to the tables where small talk is currency and conformity is worshipped. And it stings at first. You will grieve the world you outgrow, but that grief is sacred. It's the sign you've stopped pretending. That you're not asking life to get easier, you're becoming stronger. That you're not seeking comfort, you're seeking truth, no matter how sharp it is to hold. But truth is a blade, and most men don't want to bleed, so they trade it for fantasies, half-lives, applause. They marry women who don't understand them. They work jobs that sterilize their fire. They smile when they want to roar, because roaring means risk. It means standing alone. But what they forget, what Greene never lets us forget, is that the man who is alone and whole is freer than the man who is surrounded and hollow. And freedom, for all its terror, is the only thing worth suffering for. And it is suffering. Don't let anyone tell you different. This isn't a Disney redemption arc. This is a war. The war of who you were taught to be versus who you truly are. And the battleground is your mind, your decisions, your refusal to betray yourself for belonging. Killing fear means recognizing that every time you shrink, every time you perform, every time you say yes when your soul says no, you're feeding the very thing that's devouring you. The question isn't whether fear exists. The question is, will you keep kneeling to it? Because here's the punchline most men never see coming. The fear isn't just out there. It's in you. It wears your voice. It sounds like be careful, like maybe later, like what will they think? It's the voice that convinces you mediocrity is noble, that silence is safer, that comfort is happiness. But if you listen closely, beneath that noise, there's another voice. It's quiet, firm, unapologetic, and it doesn't care about being liked. That's the voice you follow. That's the man you become. And once you do, once you decide, truly decide, that no amount of applause is worth your integrity, no relationship is worth your silence, no comfort is worth your soul, that's when the fear dies. Not all at once, but enough. Enough for you to act. Enough for you to speak. Enough for you to walk into rooms without lowering your eyes. And the man who does that, who walks fully into himself, unblinking, unbroken, that man does not have to raise his voice to be heard. His presence is a sermon. His stillness is a signal. His life becomes a declaration. I will not be ruled by fear. And the moment you make that declaration, not just in your words, but in your posture, in your boundaries, in your choices, you become untouchable. Not because you are immune to pain, but because you are no longer negotiable. You have decided what you are, and the world cannot edit that. Let them stare, let them question, let them shrink. You will not. You will stand. You will burn. And you will walk forward anyway.